title slide, well, the next slide, the second slide.
Well, Dick,
Go ahead.
yeah, he'll introduce you first.
You need to hold that?
No, that's for later.
I'll take this to the second slide, which is really the title. And I'm gonna go.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm not David Lundquist. A few weeks ago, David contacted me and said his plate was overflowing and he needed to downsize. Now we all understand downsizing regardless of the type. In a moment of weakness, I said I would relieve him of the duties of the chairman of the Tall Tales program. After a long COVID shutdown, David did excellent work in reviving the Tall Tales program. And David is not here because at this point I was going to say, please recognize Dave and thank him for his good work in bringing this program back to life. He'll be on CBS tonight. Martha Beverly was born in Chicago, grew up in the suburbs, and studied at Kalamazoo College, where she met Bill Beverly. Martha and Bill were married in 1965. They had 2 sons, and then she returned to school to acquire her master's degree in library science. She drove the Kalamazoo County bookmobile for 2 years, then spent 30 years as a school librarian in the Parchment Public Schools, retiring in 2004. She also served on the Kalamazoo Public Library Board from 1991 to 1998, a period when all 5 library buildings underwent renovation. Martha and Bill moved to their garden home in August 2019, and three days later hosted their monthly Sacred Harp singing and potluck supper for 13 singers. I don't know about you, but 3 days after I moved in, I couldn't even find my toothbrush. Today, Martha will share with you how Sacred Harp singing changed her life. Ladies and gentlemen, Martha Beverly.
Sacred Harp singing is the core of my love. I hope I don't cry too much. Way back around 1994 and 95, my husband Bill Beverly came home from one of his forays to the Kalamazoo haunts, this time Treva Reed Records out in a chalet near the West Hills Athletic Club. In the other music bin, Bill discovered a CD by the Tudor Choir singing Sacred Harp tunes called the Shake Note album. This connected with something he had read. Bill read constantly. He was truly a Renaissance man, interested in and knowledgeable about a huge range of subjects, always curious and wanting to investigate everything. And he had a memory like a steel trap, always eager to learn more. He was amazing. In his reading, he had encountered a discussion of shape note music that had been mentioned by Shakespeare. It was the earliest form of vocal music practiced in America, and here was audio evidence of it. He played that CD often at elevated volume to absorb this music. He really liked it, and he wanted to learn more. And now I've got to learn to remember how to use this. That's my tune book. This led him into a convoluted path towards obtaining a tune book called the Sacred Harp, which contained those shape note tunes, and you've been listening to some Southern singing and watching. At that time, the internet wasn't as responsive as it is now, and Amazon.com didn't automatically have every possible item in the world that one might seek. So he asked Athena Books or some other mom-and-pop bookstore to see if they could get him a copy of the Sacred Harp. Weeks went by, but finally he received a call to come pick it up. He was charged $20, about double its real value at the time, its price, but because the bookstore had to jump through many hoops to locate the book and get it routed to him. And the item had traveled through various hands on its way to Kalamazoo and Bill. He began to listen to his CD, tune book in hand, trying to figure out what was going on with this music. The opening pages of the Sacred Harp contained the rudiments, a several-page summary of shape note music and its practice. And of course, Bill dove deeper and deeper into learning about this curiosity and wanting more. Now, a brief aside. Bill was a ham, an amateur radio operator with the highest level of licensing, extra. He taught classes, conducted official testing to grant licenses, wrote the local newsletter, and was a storm chaser. In order to try to have something we could do together, I earned my first 2 levels of licensing and learned the Morse code. My call letters were NAUXU. He took me to the Dayton, Ohio Hamvention, an enormous gathering of amateur radio fans with exhibits beyond number. I have never seen so many geeks in one place before. Almost all male, IQs in the highest range, plastic pocket protectors galore, slide rules in leather cases on belts, and antennas adorning ridiculous hats to enable constant communication. This predated cell phones, folks. Back to Sacred Harp. In May of 1995, Bill decided to drive to Dayton, Ohio for that year's Hamvention, and he also attended a Sacred Harp singing in nearby Versailles, Kentucky, to find out more about this music. When he returned home, he told me he was glad he went, but the singing was poorly attended and the singers weren't very proficient, but he was still very interested in attending other singings to learn more. In 1996, Bill somehow learned there was a group in Goshen, Indiana, which put on an annual Sacred Harp singing. So we made plans to attend that singing in a rural church on a hot day in July. I spent a few hours there too, and we both were amazed by the experience. The singing seemed raw, rough, enthusiastic, exuberant. I could see why Bill was interested in this, but I had not yet read about it, and I felt really unplugged, not understanding much about it at that time. Then in early 1997, the Kalamazoo Gazette, our newspaper, which once provided a wide window into local happenings, announced that there would be a Sacred Harp singing school at Kalamazoo College on February 7, with a singing teacher from Oxford, Mississippi, who would be introducing this tradition to the freshman class at K, whose theme that year was Going South. Community members who were invited up to campus to learn about the singing tradition, and experienced singers would be coming from Goshen, Chicago, and Ann Arbor to help attendees experience the real thing. Wow, let's go. Bill and I had been students at K, and it was always a pleasure to return to our familiar campus. Soon the local folks started arriving, along with the invited singers, and we all filled out registration cards. Our singing school teacher, Warren Steele, was introduced to us. He learned about Sacred Harp singing when he was studying for his doctorate at the University of Michigan in the 1970s. And this Kalamazoo gathering was really a reunion for him with old friends from those student days who also sang with him in Ann Arbor in the 70s. Bill Venema, John Fink, Zabe Pixley. Warren launched into the history of Sacred Harp, telling us that it was the earliest form of vocal music in America. It was entirely democratic with no central leader. Each person at a singing was offered the opportunity to choose a tune, to stand in the center of the assembled singers, the hollow square, and to lead that tune at the speed that he or she preferred. So now a vocabulary lesson. The class is the group gathered at any one time to sing, however large or small. The lesson is whatever you choose to sing when it's your turn to lead. Usually a single tune, but at smaller singings, a lesson might need 2 tunes. The hollow square. The class is always arranged in 4 vocal parts, like the sides of a box, singers facing each other. We sing for and with each other. The vocal parts, 4 parts, are called treble, alto, tenor, and bass. Treble is the high pitch, which is sung by both men and women. In the South, there's always a very strong presence of men on treble. Altos for women with lower pitch. Tenor is also for both men and women, and is sung in 2 octaves. This is the lead or melody of most tunes. I sing low tenor with men. And bass is for low men's voices. So actually there are 6 parts of vocal music, with voices doubled in 2 octaves in the treble and tenor parts. But I have seen men singing alto and women at bass. I can sing at bass most days. Anything goes if it's in your vocal range. During the day, many singers switch from one part to another as their voices tire, or even for one tune when they love to sing a particular part. And here are the shape notes, the beloved shape notes. The notes on the page in standard music are small ovals, often with attached flags, which indicate their length or duration. In shape note singing, the notes are written in 4 shapes, and each has a name. You are already familiar with the 7 shape singing shapes. Notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We've all seen Sound of Music. In sacred harp singing, the music is written using only these 4 shapes, and the shapes have names, which the group actually sings before we sing the poetry for each tune. Fa is a triangle or flag that points fa, fa away. Sol is an oval circle, like old Sol the sun. La is a rectangle, or 2 L's together, square, like the law. Mi is a diamond, and the alto ladies, get most of the mi's. The scale repeats the shapes. Fa, sol, la, mi, fa. That's the major scale. In minor, we start on la. The arranging committee is a small group which keeps the singing going. At a singing, the chair of the singing will welcome everyone and always lead the first tune. Then the arranging committee takes over and calls the second singer's name, usually the co-chair or other local officer of the singing, followed by the next singer's name so that that person can quickly choose his or her tune and be ready when called to lead. The arranging committee keeps up a steady pace through the whole day with hourly pauses for hydration and bathroom breaks. There will be a 1-hour long pause for a magnificent potluck called Dinner on the Grounds at midday. And we will sing around until about 3 or 4 p.m., often having sung close to 100 tunes in a day. Nancy, we're almost ready.
Okay.
Just a minute.
I'm watching.
Here's a sampling from the documentary Awake My Soul, put together by a young Atlanta couple in 2006. So you can see and hear what true Southern singing is like. I know almost every person you will see in this video, as I did in the previous ones. I have sung in the South well over 100 times, and have sung with these folks when they've traveled to singings all over, just like me. Pennsylvania, Oregon, Seattle, Chicago, Missouri, Texas. They have passed this music on to me like a good recipe and taught me how to do it right, the old way. We'll have 13 minutes of this video, and then I'll come back and talk some more. Lookout Mountain.
I could sing before I could talk, because my father would always sing to me. He was in a nursing home his last few years of his life, and I went in one day and he was playing a tape, and I was crying. And I asked him, was there something wrong? And he said, no. I sat down beside him and he said, I've never asked you for anything. This was just a short time before he died. He said, I've never asked you for anything, but I'm going to ask you for something. And that is that you never stop singing. He said, I'm afraid this music will die out.
I grew up singing Sacred Harp and going to all-day Sacred Harp singings with my grandmother, who says she carried me to my first singing when I was about 6 months old. She would play the only Sacred Harp album that she had, and I just loved to listen to it. And one day, she had put the album on play, and I heard it, and we lived about a mile and a half from the church that we went to a lot of the singing thing. And I came running into my house and said, Grandmother, they're singing out the church. We have to go. We have to go.
The earliest music in America was not preserved by the academies and institutions, but instead by unschooled rural Southerners who sang it not for an audience, but for one another and for God. It once was lost, but now it's found. This is the story of the Sacred Harp. Sacred Harp is a haunting form of a cappella hymn singing that has deep roots in the South. These songs are sung unaccompanied by any musical instrument, save the instrument given by God, the human voice. That is the Sacred Harp.
It was an amazing thing to come on this and find that it's still existing. You know, the kind of thing that you wouldn't have thought would still be around. And to be able to participate and know that it's pretty much like it was 150 years ago, pretty amazing.
At an all-day Sacred Harp singing, they start singing at 9:30 or 10 in the morning. In a typical day, we can sing as many as 90 to 100 songs.
Each song is performed once through with only syllables akin to the do, re, mi syllables many of us learned as children. The Sacred Harp singers sing fa, sol, la, and mi, each of which corresponds to a shaped note on their written music. Therefore, they are frequently called shape note singers. And after singing the notes, they sing the words.
part of it. I don't think I could ever spend very much time without being involved in singing somehow. And while I can do it at home, alone, you know, but it's still not the same. You have to have that contact with those other people.
It's almost like the ground is shaking under you, and you can just, I feel like sometimes I'm just going to be lifted up by the ground that's shaking under me, you know, so it's such a strong, powerful sound.
You don't have to be an accomplished singer to sing it. We invite everybody to come and sing with us.
I think that's one of the real great things about Sacred Harp, that it's so now, so think of it as so non-performance oriented, so experiential, and you just do it, and I was able to do it, and that was nice for me to be able to do some music.
It's a formidable example of communal, shared artistic creation that is rare to the point of non-existence in many people's lives. Many people walking around today experience art only as consumers.
I was raised in Sacred Harp. As a matter of fact, I'm sure the first song that I ever heard was a Sacred Harp song, because at the time that I was born at home up here, and my brother both. There was a couple that lived with us, an elderly couple. We called them grandfather and grandmother, although they were not really our grandparents. But grandfather was a Sacred Harp singer, and he used to sing us to sleep every night. So I'm sure I was steeped in it from the time I was born.
While the Sacred Harp has deep roots in the South, many of these songs are among the earliest in America.
Many lovers of Sacred Harp are also lovers of the history of Sacred Harp, because it's such a compelling tradition and speaks so vividly of its own past. I mean, it's something that's rich with clues about its origins.
In the Protestant churches in England, they began to wish for a little bit more formalized music with where there was harmony and rhythm. It had gotten kind of neglected during the Puritan times, and so really, in a sense, Sacred Harp, with this very strong harmony and very strong rhythm, came out of an attempt to reform that as early as 1680s and 90s. And those singing schools came to America by 1700 or so.
The church singing had disintegrated to the spot where it was nothing, it was chaos. They needed to teach singing schools, to teach the people how to sing in the churches. Some of the early composers played instruments. I mean, if you read the histories, they were musicians, and they volunteered to teach singing schools. And of course, from their singing schools, you had other amateur teachers come out that knew enough about it to be able to teach.
The purpose was to have musically literate singers in churches so that the church music would improve. The result was that musically literate singers wanted to sing something more elaborate and engaging than what they were already, the 12 psalm tunes they were already using.
These homespun composers, a lot of them, as I said, were amateurs that didn't know much about music, but they and the ones that did know music didn't have much music to teach.
So they began to import music and to write their own. And William Billings in 1770 increased by tenfold the number of American tunes in print in his first publication.
America's earliest composer, William Billings, was an unlikely singing teacher. Born in 1746, 10 years before Mozart, routinely ignored the rules of musical composition, which his counterparts in Europe insisted upon. He was a self-taught musician who claimed that nature is the best dictator.
Yeah, he's probably the best known of the New England composers of that age. He was a tanner and sealer of leather, hog reeve, which was kind of a scavenger, and singing teacher from Rhode Island to Maine, and had a very strong, compelling personality, which was a little at odds with the Boston elites.
Billings was described as having a striking appearance. He had one leg shorter than the other, a withered arm, and was blind in one eye. He died in poverty in 1800 and was buried in an unmarked grave, his family too poor to afford a tombstone.
Well, they describe him as having a loud voice and being a little bit awkward on his feet, and certainly inhaling great quantities of snuff.
Critics rejected the unsophisticated and rambunctious spirit that pervaded his tunes. The singers loved him. They especially loved his fuguing tunes, which have imitative entries of each vocal section, not unlike a round of Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
A lot of these tunes, known as fuguing tunes, were written for the singers. And the purpose of them is to teach you to carry your part by yourself if necessary, to stop when it says stop, and to pick back up when it says pick back up, and to stay together, and to hold a pitch. And that's what the singing school was called.
So now you had a deep dive into what it's like, and that last one was at Liberty Church, which was my first foray into Alabama singing. Back to that snowy February day in 1997 at Kalamazoo College. I sang soprano in high school because I wanted to sing the melody line. I faked the high notes because that really wasn't my range. So my first attempt in Sacred Harp, I tried to sing alto, but I had never succeeded in singing harmony, and I wanted so much to learn this music that Bill loved, but it wasn't clicking for me. We sang all day, and it was wonderful to have a room full of experienced singers, and we had that real Sacred Harp feel. At the end of the day, I was so exhilarated and excited, eager to continue pursuing this, to have something to do with my husband. At the end of the day, I asked the organizers what they were planning on doing with the registration cards. They were going to throw them away, so I asked for them, telling them that I thought I might start a Kalamazoo singing group, and they were happy to hear that. I made a plan to host a 2-hour singing at Kalamazoo College in May, and then again in June. I printed postcards with all the information, and I mailed them to singers in Goshen and Ann Arbor, and to all the local and regional people who had attended the Kalamazoo College event, hoping that somebody would actually show up. 21 people came in May, and in June 11 people came, all local, including Molly and Roger Williams. We were off and running. Kalamazoo College really wanted to charge us for a pitcher of water and rent for a room. So we decided to take the summer off, and I promised I'd find us a place to gather again in the fall. I was trying so hard to like this music that Bill loved, but I wasn't there yet. I learned from other singers that there would be a major singing in Chicago in late June called the Midwest Convention, which would draw at least 150 singers from all over the country. A convention means it's a 2-day or longer singing. The Saturday session was to be held at the Irish American Heritage Center on the north side, and the Sunday session at the Ida B. Noyes Hall at the University of Chicago, up in the 3rd floor vaulted room. When we entered Saturday singing, someone told me to sit in tenor, and I wish I could remember who and ask why. When the singing began, there I was in the section singing melody, and I could sing in low tenor with the men in my natural range. That first hour was my epiphany. I fell so deeply in love with this music in that hour, and I experienced overwhelming joy. Everything clicked, and now I knew that I needed to be an active part of this Sacred Harp community. We sang hard for 2 days, attending the usual Saturday evening social for fun and getting to know each other. I bought 10 CDs that weekend. Somebody gave me a minutes book, these are minutes books, which lists the singing schedule for the current year. Bill and I sang all the way home in my car with the new CDs. When we arrived home, I was so wired, I literally could not sit down. I grabbed the minutes book and checked the schedule, and there was a listing for a convention the following weekend in Henniger, Alabama at Liberty Church. We were public school teachers with our summers off, so I said, let's go, and we did. We left early Friday morning, drove the 675 miles down to Fort Payne, Alabama to our hotel. Saturday morning, we arrived quite early at the church, and when I opened my car door, a man with a big belly and thick suspenders was standing there with his hand out saying, "Hello, little lady. Welcome to Henniger, Alabama. I'm Coy Ivy." This was Coy, who I've thought of ever since as my Alabama daddy, even though he was only a few years older than me. He swept me out of the car and asked me about my singing background, and he had us fill out registration cards. He introduced us to other local singers. He made us feel appreciated and included. I sat next to a kind and patient woman who answered every question I asked between songs. Bill and I were overwhelmed by the amazing acoustics and lively singing, the range of ages from ancient to very young leaders and babies in arms. The dinner on the grounds was an eye-popping array of fried chicken and fish, pulled pork and ham, casseroles, vegetables beyond comparison, salads, cakes, pies, and more. One dairy farmer had 7 or 8 ice cream freezers on his truck plugged into extension cords with bags of ice and salt nearby. The homemade lemonade was legendary, and in the coming years we all learned how to make it. What a life-changing month it had been for Bill and me, our official initiation into Sacred Harp singing and Southern Sacred Harp singing, where it survived and flourished for over 150 years after it had been kicked out of New England because it was viewed as primitive by people progressing into a more modern era in the early 1800s, which included pianos and choir directors. This trip increased my eagerness to become a leader within the Sacred Harp community, and I often spent free time with my tune book and some CDs playing difficult or new tunes over and over and learning the shapes and the words, practicing the challenging parts at proper speed so that I could help other locals in our community to grow and learn in their own ways. I quickly discovered that the huge porch, which we had recently added to our Pinehurst Boulevard home, was the perfect place to sing. Knotty pine walls and ceiling and windows all around, acoustically live and large enough for a lot of singers. So I sent out postcards for our September 1999 monthly singing with our new singing home, my 3-season porch. no rent needed, and free filtered water from our tap. We sang out there year-round, just reminding folks to wear layers in the winter. From that time, we have gathered together as few as 8 and as many as 25 singers every single month to sing from the Sacred Harp, and later from some other shaped note books, including some 7 shaped note collections, along with the Christmas Harp, a much beloved collection of 4 shaped tunes of the season. Because Bill and I traveled most weekends to sing, we became knowledgeable about the traditions of hosting singings and organizing them. When you go to their singings, most people will come to yours. And we traveled to Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, Minnesota, and Toronto frequently. We rarely had weekends when we didn't sing somewhere. When I decided to start an annual Kalamazoo all-day singing, the Goshen Singers asked me to hold it on the 3rd Sunday in July, the day following their annual singing. That gave distant singers an opportunity for a 2-day weekend, a convention essentially, with 2 singings near each other. One fun thing each year was the car parade from Goshen, Indiana, following their Saturday singing to an ice cream parlor in Middlebury for a refreshment stop on the way to Kalamazoo. This tradition began that very first year, 1999, and grew over the decades, and as many as 40 people participated. We lined up inside for cones or bowls of rich, cold pleasure, and at some point, I would give the starting pitch for tune 300, Calvary, la, and on we go, la, la, mi, fa, la, so, fa, mi, la, so, fa, mi, la, and we'd sing our way through it quickly with gusto, and often scared non-singers right out of the store. But the staff always applauded and enjoyed our antics. To further tempt travelers, I announced that Bill and I would host a dinner social on Saturday evening after Goshen singing at our home in Kalamazoo. That first year in July 1999, we welcomed around 60 people from 8 states and 2 provinces of Canada to our social and our first Sunday singing. And within a few years, our annual Kalamazoo singing was drawing nearly 100 singers from all over the country and beyond. The lady on the porch swing, it's Judy Hoff. She has 4 tunes in the book. She's from Chicago. And the guy sitting on my counter was Ted Mercer, and you saw him in the film talking about how this singing was amazing and that he could do it. He's got 2 tunes in the book. Both are close friends. Here are a few pages in one of my photo albums showing pictures of the first Kalamazoo all-day singing in the basement of the old Wesley Foundation building on the WMU campus, which is no longer there. And here's a close-up of Molly Williams and Bill at the registration table. You all know Molly. And some of you know Bill. I always try to learn people's names. Have you noticed I work happy hour? I'm trying to sit down with every one of you eventually and have something to enjoy. So from the very first all-day singing, I took photos of every single leader at every single singing I attended. I mailed a copy of the photo to each singer after an all-day singing and sent a personal note. I also carried 2 of my photo albums to singings with the pictures, names, and hometowns included. And folks would line up at water breaks and during the dinner hour to look through those albums. And I got plenty of hugs from folks who appreciated my efforts and became friends. Later, I began a site on Flickr where I have well over 16,000 pictures of singers with their names. Also, I include an in memoriam album with my favorite picture of deceased singers that I have photographed. This is one of my gifts to this precious community, which is so dear to me. We singers love to announce our favorite kind of music on our cars. Mine is the fa sol la played in the middle with the red car behind it. Bill retired from teaching German and history for the Kalamazoo Public Schools in 2002. I retired as high school librarian for the Parchment Schools in 2004. We had visited northern New Mexico a few times in the 1980s, and we seriously considered relocating there after we both retired. But now we realized that we were so deeply invested in Kalamazoo area activities that we wanted to stay put. Besides, the drive to Alabama or other points south took only one long day from Kalamazoo, whereas traveling from Taos or Santa Fe was going to be a much more difficult trek. In 2003, two Alabama singers started Camp Fa Sol La, primarily to convince the grandchildren of now aged singers to carry on this singing tradition, which was gaining popularity in university towns but was waning in the South among the younger generations. Grants from arts and cultural organizations helped finance the camp, and anyone who could attend it, age 8 or over, singer or wannabe. David Ivey, the dedicated singer who I call the pillar-in-chief of Sacred Harp singing worldwide, hoped that the camp would continue for 3 years. It became wildly successful, filling up year after year so that multiple sessions became necessary after the first few years. Between that first year in 2003, I attended that, and 2018, I have attended camp sessions 8 times at 2 sites in Alabama, and also at Camp Fa Sol La Europe in Chmielno, Poland. In September 2018, Bill and I traveled to the UK with a group of singers and David Ivey for a 2-day convention in Brighton, then on to Camp Fa Sol La for 5 days at a charming small resort in rural northern Poland. All classes and singings are held in English, but frequently folks cluster into small groups speaking various languages, always reverting back to English when others joined them who weren't fluent. Singers from 17 countries attended and bonded closely with this music as the glue. We ate, sang, drank plenty of wonderful Polish beer, then hopped on a bus at the end of the week and sang all the way to Warsaw, an all long drive, for another weekend's convention at the university there. Bill and I have befriended hundreds of singers from all over the U.S. and many from abroad. We've sung in many states, Ontario, England, Ireland, and Poland, and we have hosted countless singers in our home, many of them overnight. Before we became involved in Sacred Harp singing, most of our friends were much like us. The same level of education, the same politics, often educators, usually similar age. But once we began singing, especially in the South, our friendships included people from wide levels of former schooling and work, differing religious beliefs and political affiliations, gay, straight, and more. And we feel so blessed to have widened our world, to experience so much that we weren't aware of and have contributed to it in our own unique ways. Bill made amazing rhubarb pies for potlucks all over the Midwest, and his heavenly hot fudge sauce anchored every annual social in our home. We were both known as great cooks and hosts for singers. I have also taught classes in the tradition for Osher Lifelong Learning, OLLI, and hosted many Sacred Harp singings in our home and organized our annual singings. And I have made mountains of food for singers, both here in Kalamazoo and to carry the singings all over the Midwest. I feel so blessed that Bill's discovery of a CD triggered a chain of events that changed our lives. Our hearts have been deeply enriched through our involvement in the Sacred Harp community worldwide, and we have also left our own mark on this singing legacy through our involvement and leadership. 10 days ago, I held the first Kalamazoo Sacred Harp singing since February 2020, which I unfortunately had to cancel the day before because of COVID numbers. And I've already booked the Ashton Grange for our next annual singing next July. Fingers crossed that we can rebuild this precious singing legacy locally. I have missed it so deeply. And someday I hope to sing with my Southern friends again. Thank you for listening to my story. And here's one more piece from my last trip to Alabama. This is something from YouTube, and we're trying to, and Nancy's going to take over, try to get this running because it wouldn't come off of my PowerPoint when I got here. Well, give it a minute.
I got it up, but the PowerPoint stuff doesn't get rid of. Well,
We could sing while we're waiting.
It's
I'll
a,
just have to go over it here.
Oh, there, yeah, that's fine.
That's
Yeah, you can just make it bigger.
Well, I will. I will do that.
And I think you wrote, and put on the CC when you can.
There it is.
Some of the earliest things written about Sacred Harp when I was starting out, and that was about 100 years ago. You can really see that it's growing.
I'm from Frankfurt and Germany.
I'm from California and I live in Pennsylvania now.
We drove here yesterday, 700 miles from Kalamazoo.
What brings me to Sacred Harp is the music, the worshipfulness of it, and the community and my friends.
I don't actually sit down much and listen to Sacred Harp music. It's singing together with people that really, really gets me.
There's so many things about the music that speak to me. I love so many different aspects of it. The actual music itself, like the melody and the harmonies, they're just incredible. You'll hear them described as being very stirring, and it's absolutely true. But there's also so much to be learned from the words, and the more I sing the music, the more the words speak back to me, and the more I learn from them.
You can try to describe what Sacred Harp singing sounds like, and you can even listen to recordings of Sacred Harp singing, but you really have to hear it.
I feel like you can really hear the community in it.
A Sacred Harp has a very old-fashioned quality to it, and I think that that's part of what draws me to it.
It sounds like a bunch of people who love to sing getting together and singing together.
I think that this is the best thing in the world. It's just changed our lives. Before we started singing Sacred Harp, our friends were all so much like us. Here in Sacred Harp, there are people all over the scale. You don't see tattoos or piercings on me. And I used to look at people like that and think of the other. No, they're not the other. They're singers. They look a little different, but that's okay. And I think that's deeply needed in our society, that we can hold hands and break the barriers between us. And I think Sacred Harp is one way to do that. I think there are lots of ways. But I think anything that accomplishes that is a big step up. Big step.
Yeah, she's beating time. You say, "Fuss, fuss, fuss."
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me share my passion with you. When we finally do sing again, if you want to join us, let me know.
Thank you, Martha, for sharing your story with your friends and neighbors. As we all know, there are many residents at Friendship Village with a story to tell. Please contact me if you would like to share your story, or if you know of someone who has a story to tell. We need stories. Put January 5, 2022 on your calendar for Terry Earhart's story of living in Yugoslavia through World War II and its aftermath. You will not want to miss Terry's story. As Tiny Tim would say, to each and every, a healthy and safe Christmas. Thank you.